Ens Astrale literally means the causation of the stars. And technically, even more than the stars, it's of the planets themselves, as far as our research is, as far as we've been able to prove. Let me put it like that. So the concept is this, is that when you are born, all of the planets are at a very particular position at the moment of your first breath. This is why astrology deals with when you were born as opposed to when you were conceived. There is a conceptual astrology form as well, but as far as we can tell, that does not have anything traceable that we can find in terms of Ens Astrale. So at the moment of your first breath, all of the planets are in a very particular position. And that is, for lack of a better term, what we could refer to as your astral fingerprint or astral thumbprint. Now, as we know, all of these planets in the sky are not staying in the same location. They're constantly moving around. And so when a planet actually moves, there are geometric relationships between where it was at the time of your birth and where it is at any given time, which is called in its transit. Okay, so typically you have to pull two different charts. You have to pull a natal chart, and then you have to pull a chart of the decumbiture of the individual, or basically at the moment when that individual gets ill or starts developing symptoms. And then you can compare those two charts and take a look at the geometric relationships that exist between the natal position and its position in its transit at any given time at that decumbiture. So basically, let's say that Venus is here, and eventually, like if it's at a trine, no big deal. You're not going to have anything. 30 degrees, no problem. Once you start to approach a sextile, which is around 60 degrees, you start to see this relationship that can be good, but it can also be bad. It usually creates challenges, so it's not necessarily bad because it'll teach you something, or it might ultimately end up tonifying your health, but there's a little bump in the road that can hurt. So sextiles will oftentimes create little bits of disease or lack of harmony, let's say, in the well-being of that individual. And then when it hits 90 degrees, then you can guarantee a square between those two planets is 90 degrees. It's not going to be a very good condition. That individual, the astral energy of that particular planet inside of that person's multidimensional anatomy is going to go haywire a little bit, and it's going to cause some sort of antipathy. It's going to cause some sort of imbalance in the wellness of that individual. And the same thing happens at 180 degrees, which is called an opposition, or the other square, 270 degrees, or at any sextiles, which are 60 degrees away. So when we see those different geometric relationships to the natal position, that's typically what we have proven here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy to actually cause Ens Astrale. The idea is that you are a microcosm of the macrocosm. And so if all of the planets and the stars are in their positions around the body, then we contain all of those within us as well. And something that many people don't know because it's taken out of TCM, but it's included in the original Taoist context as well, is that even the Chinese have the concept that all of the meridians inside of the body actually are the stars in the heavens, and they have it all mapped out. Every single meridian point inside of your body actually corresponds to the stars, the visible stars above. So this idea is pretty perennial, and it's been around since the very beginning of time. And in the Western tradition, that's really, it's no different with any of the Western philosophies. But in the Renaissance, we start to see a medical astrology kind of straying away from this concept of looking at the night sky, and we start taking a look at more like tropical calculations. And so it's an idea of rotations rather than actually watching the correspondences in the sky. With Ens Astrale, what we're seeing is that there is a direct relationship between the actual positions of the planets and their geometric relationship at any given time to where your planets were at the time of your birth. And there may be lots of other things that we can find out with the stars, but those, the stars get very complicated because we don't know if there is a perennial breakdown of constellations. The constellations that we accept now are largely a hodgepodge of Mesopotamian, ancient Greek, Islamic, or I could call that Arabic, different interpretations of constellations and stars and so on and so forth. We don't know how to break them apart or how more ancient peoples or Stone Age peoples perhaps would have been looking at those stars and breaking them into different constellations. That's a huge part of my research actually, is taking a look at that. But similar to the concept of chakras, you have the idea that there are energy centers that correspond to these different planets inside of the body. And because the planets are very large and typically the most well seen, with the exception of the furthest out ones of Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and of course the 4 comets that we've identified of Comet Johnson, Lovejoy, Tuttle, Giacobini, Kresak, and there's one more that escapes me at the moment. But at any rate, all of these planets have a different energy center location inside of our multidimensional anatomy. And they feed their astral. So the breakdown of subtle energies goes from the spiritual to the causal to the astral and finally to the physical. So the idea is that the astral, where these planetary energies reside within our multidimensional anatomy, when they go out, they affect everything that is downstream from them, which is the physical. So we have seen numerous cases where if an individual has Ens Astrale, there are almost always, almost without exception, physiological symptoms or conditions that accompany those things. And every different system of the body, we're able to narrow it down to what the affected physiology can be, or what that astral circuitry helps to influence inside of the physical body and tells physical matter or material how to form. So for instance, like with Luna, you have 2 things. You have the north lunar node and the south lunar node. The north lunar node are excesses, south lunar node are typically considered to be deficiencies. And any time that we see Ens Astrale Luna, it is of one or both of those lunar nodes. We know that those impact neurotransmitters, primarily the distribution of those neurotransmitters. They also will work with hormones in that same way. They can work with breasts, they can work with the stomach, they can work with the brain, they can work with certain aspects of digestion and also of lymphocytes, which are white blood cells. So we're seeing that there are definitive connections that we see over and over and over and over again between things that are considered to be Ens Astrale and various planets. And that is the entire concept, really, of Ens Astrale, is that positions of planets at any given time, based on their geometric relationship to the time of your birth, can actually cause an imbalance of astral energies inside of your multidimensional anatomy, which has, naturally, an impact upon physical well-being as a result of that multidimensional flow of information from the spiritual through the causal, down through the astral, and eventually into the physical. So that's about as quickly and as concisely as I can explain that.